The name of the show is the Talk with Tariro. We are coming to you and discussing today the issue of child protection. And we are looking at child protection advocacy, child protection concerns, child protection issues on their own. Helping us to discuss that, we have Chinga Govhati. She's not new on the Talk with Tariro. She is the convener of Help Her Heal. I would want to know, who is she helping to heal? We'll hear more, particularly when it comes to issues of child protection. Chinga, welcome to the talk.
Thank you, Tariro.
Yes, let's start with child protection issues.
Yes.
What are these issues that we need to look at when it comes to child protection?
Yes, when we are talking child protection, we are thinking through what needs to be done, what the issues are, and what actually has been happening. So for me, when we start talking child protection, it means there are challenges that are there that we need to face. There are challenges that we actually need to look at and say, how do we best protect our children? So it's not only looking after, it's but it's also putting in place measures to prevent, to respond, and to handle issues to do with child protection. And what are these issues?
Yes.
Obviously, issues of child abuse, issues of exploitation, issues of harassment come into play. So in a nutshell, that would be, for me, child protection. But when we are now saying, how do we manage that? We are putting in place measures to manage cases that we come across as practitioners in our daily work. So hence Help Her Heal, which is a rapid response platform for entities, for institutions, for individuals working with issues to do with gender-based violence, amongst them protection.
Yes. When we are looking at the issue of child abuse, issues of harassment, all these issues, how prevalent are they?
They are very prevalent.
Yes.
I think you have had that during lockdown, especially when it was difficult for children to go back to school.
Yes.
A lot happened within closed doors. Most were got married, most were sexually abused, and we have numbers as high as 5,000 reported by the ministry of girls even falling pregnant as a result of well, I would want to say people who take advantage of children, because people have their own excuses, and some people even come up with defenses that this child actually consented, agreed to be abused. How on earth would anyone agree to be abused? And when you are looking at a child, who is a child? You may want to ask, is anyone below the age of 18? Why 18? Because we are saying when they are below the age of 18, they still need protection of their parents, protection of other caregivers, even the school, even what I would call decision makers at national level. These are all child protection agents. So at the end of the day, when we are now saying there's something wrong, children are being abused, you asked about prevalence, it means something is not working somewhere, and that's what we would want to look at and say, what can we do as change agents? What can we do as decision makers to really make the whole child protection system and spectrum work to the best interest of the child?
When it comes to what can we do, we will come back to that. But at the moment, you have said these issues are quite prevalent. Why are they increasing? Are we losing our own social fabric as a society, as a country?
It's really sad. When you look at it and you say, what's happening? We have had stories of 15-year-olds getting married, 15-year-olds.
I read recently of a 10-year-old who actually died in Mashingo whilst giving birth.
Can you imagine? So you tell me that is normal? It's not normal. We are now living, we are worse than animals, because animals know better. They don't go after their young ones. So at the end of the day, we're just saying the social fabric is already in tatters. And it's so sad when people now look at children and they see an adult
Yeah.
A child is a child. They're in need of nurturing, they're in need of care. And it's not caring when you promise a child something in return for sexual favors.
Yes.
It is exploitation. So at the end of the day, I think parents, guardians, caregivers, and every duty bearer from the family level to the national level may be sleeping on duty.
Yeah. We are sleeping on duty,
Definitely.
I think, as communities, within the school system. Everyone is
Yes.
sleeping on duty.
Sadly so.
We are actually witnessing families marrying off 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 13-year-olds. And those children are actually getting pregnant. They are dropping out of school. And families are hiding all that when it's happening.
It's
so
so
for
sad.
children, then they then say, where do we turn to when our protectors are actually the ones who are at the forefront of abusing us?
I think marrying off a child is, for me, it's we don't have foresight. We don't have a vision. When you look at a child, for me, a child is a wonder. We don't know what's packaged within them. You see a child today who is born, I look at it and say, we actually don't even know who they are going to become when they become adults.
Yes.
But we can only know when we provide the necessary structures for them to be unveiled later on, and you say, whoa, we actually didn't know we had a doctor in the family, because no child is born with an inscription on their forehead that they're going to be so and so. But when we provide the right support, the supporting structures, the beams of support around them, at the end of the day, we get to know what they are going to be in future. So when families do that, I think there's an economic loss to marrying off your little girl. There is an economic loss when we let our little boy, our little girl drop out of school for whatever reasons. So at the end of the day, we need to look to be futuristic and say, okay, if, for instance, we sacrifice now and invest in this little girl called Tariro, maybe tomorrow she's going to be a communications guru, an advocacy guru. So at the end of the day, I think families need to think of the future rather than think of short-term solutions to problems. Problems of poverty have always been there. For me, it's not an excuse. We can't say we married off our little girl because we are poor. I mean, when we're talking about poverty, sometimes it's just a meal for a day. Why don't we put in place measures? Why don't we think of structures that are existing in the community that can actually help us rather than marry off a girl? And finally, for me, Tariro, when you marry off a little girl and she falls pregnant at 10, by the time she's 18, how many children that girl have? And then she's coming back to you when she has 4 or 5 children, when she's HIV positive, maybe when she's even suffering from fistula, and you now have to take care of her and the brood. So at the end of the day, you are creating more problems rather than finding a long-lasting solution to whatever problem is there in the family.
Stay tuned. We will be back shortly. Welcome back. Our discussion on child protection continues. Chinga, where we have these families, like we're discussing in our first segment, marrying off adolescent girls, young girls, as young as 10, 11, 12. I wouldn't even want to call it marrying off, because there is no marriage like that. And the key question that we then have is, where does the law come in to protect the young people?
It's not only legally wrong, because sometimes we're saying, well, the law doesn't allow us. Yes, the law may not allow you, but morally, what obligations do you have to this child. So for me, when you marry off a 10-year-old and then you wait for the law to come in and say this is wrong, but you as a parent, you as a caregiver, you as a person staying with this child and this family in this community, what are you saying about it? Because at the end of the day, the law will only work where the people who are in a community, who are in a family, who are in a nation, who allow that law to work. So what does the law say? Honestly, when you have sexual intercourse with a 10-year-old, that's outright rape. There is no negotiation.
Thank you.
So in terms of the law, having sexual intercourse with anyone who is below the age of 12, even if where they consented, it's actually the highest form of sexual abuse that you can come across. For girls, it's rape. For boys, it's called aggravated indecent assault. And the law actually protects any child who is below the age of 16. Even where they have consented, you still be arrested and still be prosecuted. It was once called statutory rape. And for me, as a child rights practitioner, it's rape. There is no.
So why aren't people being arrested, Chinga? Because the cases are so prevalent. What do we need to do? Here I'm looking at the whole family that's making sure the father who's marrying off an adolescent girl, the whole family should just be locked up.
I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. So that's what the law has said. Recently, in May, there was a judgment that came out from the Constitutional Court, where they were saying that no child, when in fact the import of the judgment is to the effect that if we say the Constitution is protecting anyone below the age of 18, and the definition of a child is any person who is below the age of 18, we can now not segregate or put them into different categories or classes. We are just saying a child is a child. Of course, in terms of international principles, we look at what are called evolving capacities. So for instance, a 10-year-old, their view of the world is completely different from a 16, a 17-year-old. Yes, that's going to be taken into account, but for developmental purposes. It's not for exploitative purposes. So for me, when I look at that judgment, it's saying, okay, when we are talking about issues to do with sexual debate, sexual abuse and the like, there's a thin line. There's what's called exploitation, and that's what the law should regulate, because some abusers will then hide under the gaze of, the child herself agreed. She said,
how does the child agree?
They didn't appreciate that. When they were agreeing, they were not just agreeing to the sexual act itself, they were saying, agreeing to falling pregnant at 10, at 12, at 15. They were agreeing to an infection of an STI, including HIV. They were agreeing to dropping out of school. They were agreeing to a life of poverty. No one would agree to that. Or they were agreeing to debilitating issues of fistula that we talked about. Because when a child is 15, is 10, is 12, are they adequately developed that they can hold a baby in their womb? Definitely not. So at the end of the day, I think we should look at it and say this is an offense. Hence, we have a New Marriages Act. And that act, if you allow me, I'll read in section 3. The
Notorious Marriages Act.
Notorious in the sense that for me, when I'm looking at section 3, I'm happy. I know you're thinking of section 41, but I'm looking at on civil partnerships. I'm looking at the section that protects children from being married off, which is sexual exploitation, by the way. It's no child in their right senses would go and say to somebody, please marry me. I really want to be a mother.
Maybe read it to us.
School. No child
would agree to that.
A child needs time to grow up. So what does it say? In section 3, it talks of minimum age of marriage, and it says, no person under the age of 18 years may contract a marriage or enter into an unregistered customary law marriage or a civil partnership. For the avoidance of any doubt, it is declared that child marriages are prohibited, and under no circumstances shall any person contract, solemnize, promote, permit, allow, or coerce, or aid, or abate the contracting, solemnization, promotion, permitting, allowing, or coercion of the marriage, unregistered marriage, or partnership, or whatever it is, through pledging, through promise in marriage. And then it goes on to say that everyone else who is involved, it becomes a criminal offense except the child himself or herself.
Yeah.
So that's the child protection we're talking about. The law is realizing that no child would make that conscious decision to get married, to allow yourself to be married off. These are the adults around him who are allowing this. Maybe in the next segment we'll talk about, so what happens when my 14-year-old, my 15-year-old is going out or has had sexual intercourse or has been made pregnant by another 16-year-old.
Yes.
Yes, so that's
exactly
that's something totally different altogether.
Yeah.
But the law is clear. When it's saying no one should allow this, it means anyone who is above the age of 18 who is allowing that child to be in that situation where she ends up saying, I am Ningi, I am so and so, I'm married to this guy. No child should ever be married off.
The law is quite clear. It's stating that no child should be married off. But children are being married off. And the key question that we then ask is the law being effective? Join us after the break. We would want Chinga to answer that question. Welcome back as we continue with our discussion on child protection. And before we went for the break, Chinga was focusing on the Marriages Act, Section 3, where she clearly articulated that it stipulates that no child should be married off. But in our country, it's almost like a pandemic where children are being married off. And we're then saying, if the law is there, is it being effective, Chinga? Like this Section 3, we know, we talk about the New Marriages Act. Is it already in effect, or it's something that is still to?
No, it is in effect.
Yeah. So why isn't something happening?
If we go back to the same question that you asked, if the law is there to say no child should be allowed to be in this kind of a setup,
yes,
at 16, or when they are below the age of 16, whoever has sexual relations with that child is considered a criminal, an offender of the law. And you said, so why are people not getting arrested? Well, that's the same question. The law is now there, so it's for people to use it. So if people don't make reports, or if people don't know how to make reports, we end up with such a scenario where the law is just there in a vacuum, but no one is making use of it. So we are now saying, when people get to know that there is a law, that is saying it's an offense to get into that kind of a relationship, even a promise to marry that child. It's a criminal offense. Let's use the law. Let's report such cases to the police. I mean, it's completely, totally wrong for us to be in a situation where we have a child who is 15, who is going to give birth. That's immoral of us. And we should ask ourselves certain questions. What will happen to that child?
And some die whilst giving birth.
They definitely do. So now we have so many cases. We have the case of Memory Machaya. We have other cases in the press of children who are dying giving birth. It's completely abnormal for us to get to that stage where that child ends up in such a situation. So the law is there to be used, And we now say some parents will not report because they are complicit.
Yeah.
They are part of the whole deal.
And the law is saying you can also be arrested if you are complicit.
Be arrested.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
You may be the big aunt. You may be the big friend of the family who come and you do all the dancing and you relating at this marriage. You are complicit. And the law is saying you are part of the
no roller squad, guys. No roller squad for children, please.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's completely improper. And when you read through that whole act, it has now given powers to even traditional leaders to be part of marriage officers. And the civic society, when they're lobbying for that, we're saying, okay, traditional leaders are closer to families in communities, so they are aware that Tariro, your 10-year-old daughter that you are saying is 16, because nowadays children grow up too quickly. It's actually 10. The traditional leader will say, no, but in my register, in my village register, this child was only born in 2012, so she must be 10. She can't be 16 as you are alleged. So these are structures that are meant also to be protecting our children. It's not for us to abuse them and say to the traditional leader, just marry her off. She may look 10, but she's 16, when you definitely know that your child is under the age of majority, which is 18.
And what happens now when it's two 15-year-olds who impregnate each other and they're saying, we want to get married?
Yes, that's a question that parents are asking and saying, what will happen when a child and another child gets into this kind of a relationship? They say we love each other. We actually talked about such a case yesterday on another group where the child is adamant. She's saying, if you take me out of this relationship, I'm going to commit suicide. But we are saying the law is also there to protect her. At regional level, at SADC level, we have a model law that is called the SADC model law on eradicating child marriage and helping children already in marriage. So it recognizes that there are certain situations where a child may already be in this setup or may refuse to leave. And we say they still needed to be treated as a child in need of care. But in my experience, Tariro, guess what? I've seen that children who refuse to leave this setup is because some undue pressure has been brought to bear on them. So they've been promised something. If you stay here, this is what we're going to do. If you go up after giving birth, you go back to school, we'll do this for you, we'll do this, and it doesn't materialize when they've given birth. And they stay there for 10 years, they still remain the grade 6 child that she was before she even got into this relationship. But that's the argument also that's there with the new judgment that I talked about around age of sexual consent. And people are saying, okay, if we increase the age of sexual consent to 18. What will happen to child issues? Yes, there is child-to-child sexual abuse. We need to put it aside. It's still abuse. There is child-to-child sexual relations where they agree and get into that. We need to speak at issues around sexual debut. When do our children start thinking of having sexual relations? How do we treat them? In other jurisdictions, in other countries, in their laws, what they have is what they call the age difference. There's an age difference that they look at. If, for instance, a girl is 16, the boy is 18, or the boy is 19, the law may not prosecute because they are saying, okay, we kind of give allowance for this to happen. So we look at the age difference. A 14-year-old and a 25-year-old guy, there's a difference of 11 years. There can never be any consent. We are now looking at an imbalance in terms of even their their mental, their
Mental, yeah.
psychological appreciation is completely, totally different.
Yeah, we are not even going to be able to finish everything. We are going to make sure that in future we bring back Chinga to finish off this whole discussion, because it's quite topical, it's worrying. We need to address it as a country. Until we meet again next week, it's goodbye.